I'm Lauren Sterling, and this is Ordinary Grit, the podcast where I talk to ordinary people who have overcome and are doing amazing things. Because your story has power.
Okay, well, you have been here before, but you haven't been here before because this is my new setup, and this is not how we normally sit and talk, is it?
No, not really.
You're my husband now.
Yes.
Yeah. So we talked before a long time ago. You were on Ordinary Grit, and so we've talked a lot about having you back to talk about, I don't know, we'll see. This is going to be very much more like a conversation and not like I'm interviewing you, because I think it could be back and forth. So I don't know what we're going to talk about. I don't know if we're going to talk about what it's like to date the widow, what it was like to date this widow. I don't know. People probably think that's really crazy.
What it was like to date this guy.
Right. That. Or even just like godly dating. And I don't know. We'll see. So the last time people heard from you, we heard a lot about your story. Yes. And more about your testimony up to a point. So we didn't hear, a whole lot. So I don't know. Let's just, we can talk about how we met. Do you recall meeting me or knowing about me?
So I had heard about you before
when you were locked up.
Before I came home.
Okay.
My parents were going to what is our church.
Yep.
And she would tell me about this big stud, this big handsome pastor that she liked, and his beautiful wife. So we would have conversations about what happened that week or what they talked about, or I think she was in one of your classes.
Yeah.
She said she really enjoyed it. So she was really new to all of this. So she there was an excitement there.
Yeah.
To share what she was hearing.
They were learning.
Yeah.
Well, and they were connected because of people that were building relationship with you when you were locked up.
Through the prison ministry,
right,
yes.
Right. And I didn't know any of that, but I taught her how to read the Bible class.
Yep.
And I remember they were front row. For whatever reason, I would talk to your mom at fellowships and things. I didn't know, you existed, but I had conversations with them, and I, for whatever reason, paid attention to them. Not that it's a huge church, but you don't necessarily talk to everybody or connect with everybody. But I did know who they were. I do remember their faces in that class. We even talked about real estate a little bit or something. So anyway, so you knew of us, and then your friend and mentor that was visiting you. You knew Scott was ill. I think you were praying for us.
Yes, at some point in time. He had shared that with me, and then I also heard it from my family. I remember praying. I remember intentionally praying for Scott and for you guys, for the family. And I remember me and Dan, we talked about it, and I just remember listening to him, like you could feel the pain.
Yeah.
The uncertainty,
your friend and your mentor is telling you about the second pastor, the second big name and big role in our church to have cancer, and and it was faster. So we just had 8 months, and so right about the time that Scott passed, you were coming home.
Released. I was released a couple of weeks before he passed.
Right. Okay. So you were I think you were coming to Gateway, but I wasn't around.
I immediately came.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
So, okay. So then what did it look like then to, I don't know, to know who I was, and even where were you at? You got home, and what were your thoughts about, women in general?
So I had been praying when I was incarcerated that the Lord would protect me from myself. And, I'd just pray for, if I were to be in a relationship, that it would be with a godly woman. I asked for his guidance and asked that, that I could be patient and walking this out and so that I was able to focus on taking care of things that needed to be taken care of. And there was a lot of things to knock out when I came home,
Sure.
just, everyday things, right? So I wasn't, I didn't walk out with the mindset of, I can't wait to find a chick, like I need to find somebody now. I was gone for 9 years and, hadn't been in a relationship for a while and my life just looked different up to, from the time that I walked in to the time that I walked out. God had really changed some ways of thinking. In prison, guys have opportunities, with women that are in there, and I had opportunities, and the Lord would say no, and I would run. I'd make sure that I was aware that I wasn't just following that sinful instinct, to chase a woman. So when I came home, I just tried to be really mindful of that, and started going to church and got a job and was just really trying to hammer some things out.
Okay. So at some point, like we met, I mean, do you recall?
Father's Day.
Well, the first time you ever talked to me was Father's Day that year, because I spoke on.
You spoke that day.
Yeah, like part of. It wasn't. Yeah, I gave like a short little thing or something,
yeah.
And I do remember you talking to me briefly after that, and then months went by, and I mean I knew you were there, but what at some point you like intentionally spoke to me.
Mm-hmm. So I remember you speaking on Father's Day. I just remember the conversation of, like you were sharing some of your life with Scott, and I don't know, it just sounded different to me of what I was used to.
The way I communicated,
the way you communicated about him, and some of the, I think there was a story you were sharing about, like how you had interrupted him in prayer, and he was on his knees, I believe you said, and he was praying, and that it was just a gentle response. It wasn't a.
Yeah, I didn't know. I can't believe you remember that. You have you don't remember what we like talked about last week, but
yeah.
You remember what I said that day. And he, yeah, I didn't know he was praying. I didn't know he was preparing for a message. He was downstairs in like a split level house that we had. And so like it was open, but downstairs that I couldn't see. And so I'm like yelling, like trying to get his attention. And when I rounded the corner, he was on his knees preparing, and he's like, "Hey, what's up?" And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry." But he could have been like, I was praying, like all really spiritual. Yeah. And so, yeah, I actually what the pastor had asked me to talk about that day was, what does God sound like?
Mm-hmm.
That's what he had called me prior to that and said, what does God sound like? Hey, Lauren, what does God sound like? And I went to that story that God sounded like that to me.
Yeah.
That like pretty gentle response, which anyway, I feel grateful that he doesn't sound like the frustrated perfectionist that actually lives inside of my head. Is that really isn't how God sounds to me. And some of that probably is because of Scott. So yeah, I told that story.
Yeah, I just remember thinking, just kind of reflecting on the conversation. It's like, that's like you don't want to be seen, from you don't want to be recognized from your past, right? You don't want people to just see you and just think about your past. You want people to see something different. You want, I want people to know that God changed my life. So when I would hear these stories, I would just sit back and like, yeah, Lord, that's what I want.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I want, Lord.
Kinda
I
mental
want
notes.
something different, And then some months went by. I remember praying. I had got into a relationship with somebody. She wasn't walking with the Lord, and it was a wrestle for me. Had some other opportunities, and it was just like, no. I mean, there was one point in time where, I had a vision, and the Lord just like slams this door, and I'm like, okay, like I hear
That's a
you.
no. Yeah.
That's a no. Like So I began to pray that God would put somebody in my life. Not I wasn't praying for a girlfriend, but that God would put somebody in my life that I could communicate with. And I remember seeing you. I remember walking by you and saying hi a couple times. And just one day, it was like, I think I said I wanted to.
Hey, I want to know you.
I wanted to know you. And you had some other stuff going on, and
I was like, well, this week and you were like, hey, we got plenty of time. You didn't have a watch on, but you were like, we got plenty of time.
yeah,
I was like, okay.
yeah.
My mom was standing there. One of my kids was standing there. It wasn't like, I didn't think you were like asking me on a date, but I just am so type A, I guess, that I was like, well, I mean, if we need to have an appointment, I don't know. I got really like formal, and you're like, man, we got plenty of time.
And I wasn't thinking, I wasn't thinking that this could be something. There wasn't no thought of that. It was just her right there. Like, I want to get to know you. And then after we had a conversation or two, I knew why.
You knew why what?
I
that
knew
you wanted to know me?
I knew why that. Yeah, I knew the. It was almost like okay, God, why? Yes, this is why. And we talked about the
really
Lord.
mouthy.
Well, yeah, a little bit.
I was. You were still kind of talking to that girl, and I was telling you why you shouldn't be and why you were messing with her head. So, because I didn't have any intentions of this becoming something either.
Yeah.
So I was just, what do I have to lose? I'm just going to tell you what I think.
And I think that was probably good for us. Like, just we just started to get to know each other. I remember just like, I'm just going to lay everything out there, and she's going to run.
You were awkwardly honest. Yeah. Yeah. Once we started talking on the phone, you'd be like, hey, let's pray. You'd start praying, and then it was like, and then we could have a conversation. I'm like, this guy's weird. Like, I've never had anybody, it's not even like starting a conversation. It's just like, I don't know. It was just like formality. And I don't, maybe it was just you trying to set up the conversation in a godly way. But yeah, we ended up just talking about a whole lot of things. There was a lot of life going on. So, I mean, I'd been, you knew that I was a widow with 8 kids. I had, I think 6 kids at home still. I think so.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it was an interesting friendship to want to embark on. So anyway,
I remember whenever I asked you, I said, hey, you want to start reading some scripture together? And you got like really nervous or something. And you were like, hey, that's like intimate. And I just remember being on the phone and like smiling real big, because I've never heard, I mean, people in the world today, they meet and, they jump in bed together, and
that's what
that's
people
how they
call
start their
intimacy.
relationship. Yeah, that and I'm talking about reading scripture together, and
I'm like, whoa,
you're like, whoa, hold up.
Yeah. But in a way, I'm not crazy. I wasn't wrong.
No,
like,
you weren't wrong.
That there is,
and I didn't even really understand why you would respond that way, because I'm like, what?
Yeah. Like, wow, she's a real prude.
But it was to me, it was attractive. Like, it's like, okay, this is. It's almost like the Lord saying, "This is what you asked for, right?" Like, yeah.
I didn't know that this
I
is
asked
what I
for
asked
somebody
for.
that I
She's
could communicate
weird,
with, and but so.
Yeah. I think for me, when Scott died, I did not automatically think I am going to date. In fact, I was probably really boldly and foolishly blunt because I had such a good thing. I didn't think I would do it again.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard since there are stats that say that if you were happily married, you're more likely to get married again. And I'm like, okay, so it's a compliment to Scott, like that makes me feel a little better. But I think you see both. I think you see people who, were really happily married that are just, or were married a lot longer than me. And it's super foreign to, if when you've been married 40 years to even think about that again. For me, it was more like we had a really good thing. We really liked each other. People will tell you that you'll hear, people talk about the love story that we were. And so I think I just thought God doesn't promise it at all. Like it's not part of the gospel that you get to fall in love and live happily ever after and have, 2 kids and a white picket fence. Like that isn't the gospel. God can be good and just, and it can be a beautiful story and that not be what he promised for you. Yeah. And so the fact that I got it once, I think I like really boldly said, I'm not doing this again.
Yeah.
And so I really, truly, wasn't like, oh, well, I'm going to, talk to this guy and make him fall in love with me. And I was a little bit like you. And maybe I'm fast forwarding, but the first time we like sat down and had dinner, I was like, okay, I have gift cards. So I'm not going to let him buy my dinner. I will buy dinner with these gift cards. It's free. So neither one of us bought dinner. And I am going to bring my own car and he's going to know everything that is like, I'm going to put all of it on the table and he's never going to want to see me again. So I'm going to dinner once and he's not going to want to hang out again. And so in a way I was kind of like, you said you were like telling me all the scary things. And I mean, being fair, those are scary things to the cop's kid that is like opposite, like super straight laced. Yeah. I have not ever done anything. I have not smoked cigarettes. So, I mean, we come from very different places. So yes, you could have probably scared me, but in a way for me, it was more like, I'm going to show you all the bad things. Mm-hmm. So that you can just go ahead and reject me now. I think I was coming from a more wounded place than you even were, maybe, which from the outside, the world might have said that you were more wounded than me. But I just think, I don't know, by the time we started talking, some of my confidence when he first passed and my identity had been shaken a little bit. I actually said some of that on a little clip that I have from another conversation, but some things had been said and you walked in at a very vulnerable, very messy season. So because it was enough later that like the enemy had really started to wreak havoc on some things. And I had said when Scott died, I'm like, my identity is not shaken. I mean, I said that out loud. I'm like, I know who I am. I knew who I was before him. I didn't die. My identity didn't die when he died. We were 2 separate people. I have my own race. He did not pass the baton to me. I have my own race and I'm running. But man, like a year, 18 months later, some things happened that made that in question. Like, I think that the enemy really came after me in a way that, I'm super grateful that you were my friend in that season because, I guess because you hadn't been around and you didn't know him, I felt like I could like tell you all the really hard things. Yeah. And, I mean, I like dumped on you, cried a lot. And really, even when he died, I wasn't quite that way. I really, You kind of came in at a really vulnerable, really messy season. So I felt like if I can just show you all the really bad things and tell you what people are saying, you don't know me well enough to not believe them. So you'll run and and you did not. So
yeah, it was, getting to know you. I should just sit back and reflect on our conversations. And, it was, I don't think there was a day that passed that we weren't talking about the Lord in some capacity, and just hearing your testimony and all of that. I knew that I had a testimony and I was learning how to share it. But then to hear somebody else who's hungry for the Word of God and really walking it out and really going through some really hard things, and I don't know, it was encouraging, like, for your faith to see, like, wow, she's like walking out some crazy things right now, but she's still glorifying God in this.
But you could have been like,
I learned a lot from
fine, but like, I don't need to. She's got a lot of baggage. So, like, I joke that you liked me about 30 seconds later, but at what point are you like, okay, I think I am gonna like pursue the widow and the disaster that comes with her? You can lie and make it sound longer if you need to.
I don't know. I think I like kind of early. I knew that I just wanted to see where it was going to go. But I also knew that, like, there was no room for games. Like, if I wasn't fully serious and, like, willing to, like, walk these things out with you, I wasn't, I wasn't going to string you along or wasn't going to,
Had you been like that before, or was that something that was different because I was fragile or something? Do you think I was breakable?
I did tell you were fragile one time, I think.
It probably wasn't very smart.
No, I don't think it
probably
was
didn't
very
go well.
smart. But, okay, you mean like before?
Is that a new thought?
Because in my old life?
Right. You wouldn't have cared about my feelings?
I wouldn't have cared, no. But, the Lord had definitely changed my heart, and then I'm meeting you and I'm knowing you, and like,
I don't think you wanted to crush me.
No, not at all. Not at all. I liked you, and I started to like you a lot really quick. But I knew that, like, hey, no games.
I better know what I am doing.
Yeah. But also like
and I didn't feel that way. I didn't feel that pressure of like I needed to know. I wasn't like. It took me a very long time.
Yeah.
To feel.
Yeah.
Like I was in.
Yeah. There were times where, I kind of felt myself getting a little ahead of myself, and there was one point in time where the Lord was really clear with me, and it was like, today you're just gonna be your friend. And I remember that like loud and clear. And there was times after that I had to say that to myself, like, hey, today you just be your friend. Just listen.
Because why? Because there are things that are different about dating the widow than dating the girl that had a bad ex, a loser, or somebody that left her, or that she left, or cheated on her, or what is that like? I mean, let's talk about that piece.
So I've been in bad relationships. And I would say that I was the biggest problem, of course, in that. I was the
You were the bad part of the bad relationship.
Common denominator, yeah. So I don't know. It's just I knew I didn't want that, and I knew that I would rather not be in a relationship than to be in a, in a bad relationship.
Sure.
To say.
I just mean, what is different about dating the widow than dating someone who came from a bad, like the rules are different, right? We don't talk about exes because we talk about Scott.
Yeah.
So that's different, is what I mean.
I don't know that I ever really like thought of it like that. I mean,
No?
you would say it, but that's not that wasn't like my way of thinking of the widow. I like never labeled you as the widow. You know, I never thought like that. It wasn't really where I was at. You know, as I was getting to know you, it's just like, man, she's been through some rough things. You know, I wasn't shocked. I mean, I've been through hell and back, and know a lot of people that have been through a lot of hard things. So, I mean, I don't know. I just looked at you as a normal person, you know, just in this broken world.
You don't think it plays a role in today, in going forward, with my kids? Or
What do you mean?
I think it's different in that, and maybe the key is you haven't been in a godly relationship really with anyone else ever.
Yeah.
So the fact that it's a widow maybe just feels like this is just what a more godly, patient relationship looks like. I don't know. But like the grief part doesn't go away. The remembering parts don't go away. This year it was 4 years, and March felt like it was like I woke up March 1st and it felt heavy and sad. And I think we talk about that stuff. I mean, I think some of that had more to do with some other feelings of loss in other areas of my life that, it just like, it was like March 1st, but it just like, I've described it as like this undercurrent of sad, like this river that runs underneath the skin or something. And then you got sick in March. But I didn't know that you were like really sick. And I was a jerk in my head, because I'm like, well, you're not dying. So I don't know why you can't get out of bed and go to work. I didn't understand. I've since changed because you were really sick.
Yeah.
But in my head, I had to get past the March is sad for me, and I can't have a sick husband in March, and go, no, today you're driving to that hospital in Kansas and you're going to be a wife today. Yeah. So get your big girl pants on, and this isn't about you. And I cried on the way there and didn't cry in front of you, and was like, get your act together, because I carry things sometimes like in the body that you don't even know why you feel that way. And I've read other people say that too, that there are things like memories your body holds that, like, I've woken up on certain days and just felt these certain things. Or, ways that I try to actively remember, whether it was our anniversary, with Scott, or it was, his birthday, or you allow for those things, in a way that, I don't know, if I was a regular divorce, it wouldn't have gone that way. Death is different. And, we didn't break up. So you have really had to handle grieving, an ongoing grieving family.
Yeah.
Really differently than if it had just been, breakups and now we're together kind of a thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I get what you're saying. I don't know if the situation was different. I really don't know what it would look like. I do understand dark seasons because I've had so many of them. So I think the Lord's given me an understanding. Learning to be patient and to be attentive, to look outside of myself and things like that. We all have this selfish side in us, and sometimes we overlook things that we should be paying attention to, and it's a learning process, right? For both of us.
Sure.
Like we're learning a lot of new things. We're learning things about each other, and as we walk this out together. So I would say that it has been good. It's been a blessing. And yeah, God is good. God is good. Yeah.
It's good and hard. All the parts of the story are.
Yeah.
There's good and hard in the same.
Yeah.
In all of it.
Yeah. I'd often ask myself, is this where I'm supposed to be? And then I'd bring it to the Lord. Lord, is this where I'm supposed to be? There was always a clarity with you of yes, this is where you're supposed to be. Even when it didn't feel great, or we're at the top of the mountain and we're ramming heads together.
What? Yeah.
Two big personalities, So, this is. I know that this is where the Lord has called me to be. To be here, to be with you.
Which I think has to help on the days when, my kids are having a bad moment, or, things like that. So,
Yep.
Okay, let's talk about just like less of the serious of where we were coming from, but just like godly dating. Like, what was that like? Because everybody expected us to live together. I'm sure people think it's super strange that we tried really hard to, date in a godly way. I was dating while my teenager was dating, so that made for some really interesting conversations. But what's that like as a guy? You work in a very man's world, like man's men kind of thing. What was it like to have those types of conversations? Because we lived 40 minutes away from each other. We dated a long-ish time for adults. To do it in a godly way, mostly because I took a really long time to be all the way in. So, like, what did that look like, and how do you answer questions about why we did it the way we did it?
I would say my goal in life is to please the Lord. It's to please God, right? And I know myself. I know my past. It was foreign to me to walk this out with a godly woman, and just to know that, like, hey, there's some lines we're not going to cross. And you could say it, but to actually do it is different. And it just got it to me. It's like, the longer we dated and the longer we walked this out, it was just like, it's that pursuit to the finish line. You're like, hey, I want to walk this out well. I don't want to cross that line, and you don't want to sin against the Lord. You don't want to hurt somebody's feelings. You don't want to, how do I say this? You don't want to mislead, right? Mm-hmm. Or pull somebody in the wrong direction just for what feels good in the moment, right?
Right.
So I
didn't want to jeopardize us either.
Yeah.
I think I was afraid that if we messed up, that it was over. Yeah. That, like, I didn't want to jeopardize that as much as I wasn't gonna. I wanted to do what God wanted, and but I had lived that way before, and so in my 20s, that people thought that was really bizarre too.
I never have it, and when I was in prison, the guys, that's what everybody's focused on is getting out and having sex, right? First day out, that's your goal. And I was asking the Lord to protect me. Like, I know myself. I know that if I get out there and let's say I'm working and I'm not committing crimes, but, I know that if I start spending time with women that are not seeking a godly relationship, like, I know my flaws.
It's just too easy. Yeah.
It's too easy. Yeah. So
even godly women. And there are lots of people that call themselves Christians that are like, it's 2025.
It's okay. Yeah.
I've been married before. So, we truly are, bizarre. There was
Yeah.
people who I really thought knew me that assumed that you were living here. And like that, it hurts my feelings actually. Like,
I think one of the biggest things for us is that we were able to talk about it. We were able to talk about it early. And I was honest with you. I had shared with you that, hey, I crossed the line, after I got out. And, it wasn't to say what everybody else would say, all in or whatever.
Like,
right.
super
But I knew
messed up. But
I knew that I
for
crossed
you,
the line.
it was messing up.
Yeah. And I knew that I didn't want to do that. So what did I do? I called my mentor up and I'm like, hey, Dan, dude, I jacked up.
I don't want to do it again.
And had a talk with the pastor at the church and was like,
you're so honest.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, painfully honest. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like
I felt like I had to bring it to the table because, if I just put it in my pocket and just keep it there, then,
deceit grows. Yeah.
You do it again.
Yeah.
It says, scripture says to confess your sins so that you may be healed, right? And that was a part of my life that needed some healing. It needed some redirection, because I knew that it could, at some point in time, I will get too comfortable.
Yeah.
And, my focus will be just to sleep with whoever, whenever, So I'm just grateful that the Lord protected me in that, and that I was able to meet somebody that was like-minded and willing to
Yeah. I was trying to trip you up at the beginning, actually. I was asking you a lot of questions and I was just waiting for you to have the wrong answer. So I was asking you about, pot. I was asking you about pornography.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was expecting, because again, I hadn't dated in, 14, 15 years, like a long time.
Yeah.
And so, for Scott and I, it wasn't that conversation felt so like normal. But we were doing student ministry together. I was spending time with his daughter in that age group. Like he knew where I stood. Like we didn't necessarily have to have some like, this is who I am conversation. We were really good friends for a long time. For you, it was like, I'm starting over, this many years later. And I know there's a lot of people who claim to be Christians that think a whole bunch of things are okay. That obviously I didn't even want to read the Bible together every day. Like, that seems a little tight. I don't want to be that tight. So I certainly was trying to see how you were living when nobody else was looking.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And I was expecting like some answers. Like I remember where I was when I was like, what's your take on pornography?
Yeah.
And I was expecting like, well, there's time and place to, keeps you from messing up with a real girl. And you didn't answer like that. And so I'm like, okay, I kept trying to get you to say the wrong thing so that I could have an exit.
Yeah.
So we had talked about a lot of stuff because of that.
I had to relearn a lot of things. You grow up and, as a kid, you get exposed to things that are like right in front of your face. And, at a young age, I'm messing around with girls and, that was a picture of, a part of my life, right? I'm just,
It's like a total rewire.
Yeah.
Of your brain.
Yeah.
And more years of a certain way of thinking than not.
And like in prison, guys pass magazines around like candy, and the Lord is like, hey, stay away. Hey, stay away. So it's challenging. Then you come out and then you got these phones that you have all the access, like you can,
Because prior to that, they were different. Phones were different when you went in than they were when you came out. It's humorous because the technology changes so fast.
Yeah.
But
But even like getting out, you recognize how the enemy puts the lures in front of you, right?
Sure.
The pretty lures just dangling right in front of your face, and
sometimes being godly is as attractive or like draws a certain kind of woman or temptation, because it didn't matter like prior that Scott was married. That, I mean, he's this godly, really handsome, as your mom said, and so people didn't care that he was married. I mean, people would practically knock me over to stand next to him. I'm like, I am right here and I am scary. I will take you out. But so sometimes it's just a different kind of, it's still the same kind of sin, but now it's because you're godly, or it's because you're the church guy. So it's still there. There's always going to be a way for the enemy to try to trip you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't want to jeopardize.
Yeah.
Always it had been, it's me and God had a deal. I mean, that's kind of what it looked like more, when you're super young, it's the consequences that keep you from crossing the line. But then as I got older and I was, in my 20s, then it was like, no, me and God have a deal. I'm not messing it up now.
Yeah.
And so that part was always kind of ingrained, but then even more so, I wasn't going to allow you for your relationship with the Lord to get messed up. I mean, I don't know, it mattered. It mattered that I was living truthfully in front of my kids. I mean, my teenager has these thoughts about my what she would consider strict, she calls them cultish, views on some things. But it's like, no, like I am not, the guy I date isn't in my bedroom. You're certainly not having a guy in yours. Like, I mean, I was able to live out what I was saying, which is a strange thing to do, walking that out with your daughter, but also kind of a weird gift for her to have seen that and for her to be figuring out how to date at the same time.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful for some of that, as bizarre as it is, and it isn't like fun to do the dating scene in your 40s. And now we joke about how not sexy it is to get married after you're 40. So we have been through some things in the last few months as married people. So anyway, we've had some really fun hospital moments and a really good time. So anyway, that's just part of the deal.
Yeah.
You don't act like dating a widow is anything different than anything else. So that's what I thought we would talk more about that, about how hard that is to walk out.
It's been good.
You act like it's normal. I guess it's all you know now.
Yeah.
What would you say that you learned about God, whether it was dating or being married? How would you say that it shapes your view of the Lord?
I would say this. I would say just focusing on His grace. Okay. So many things that I don't deserve that God has provided. Right. And to have a great wife and a great relationship. Today I was talking to a friend, and today's their anniversary, 29 years, I think he said. And I said, what's the highlight? What's the highlight? What's the big highlight? And he looked at me and he was like, there is no big highlight. He's like, she's my best friend. She's the only person I talk to. And I looked at him and I shook my head and I understood what he meant. There's so many highlights, right? And I shared with him. I said, my wife is my person. Like I have kids and family, friends. My wife's my person though. Like she's the person that I talk to every day, all day. Like, so I understand. There's a lot of highlights.
Well, and I guess, and if there's like one big highlight, then you have to come down, right? Like, I mean, so
now we're building memories.
Yeah.
So it's good.
I'm trying to think what I would say. You are so honest, but there's a humility about the way that you talk about your past. You don't glorify the sin or what you did. I mean, there are people like me who have grown up in church and who want some, big, scary testimony and think that their testimony is boring. And I don't wish for that, because then something happens, But also, it's really not that different than any other story of the gospel's the same, right? I mean, I feel like we were walking out very similarly. Is God still going to be who I thought he was? For you, it was after being in a very controlled environment. Is God going to still be, is he going to come through? Is he going to be who he said?
Yeah.
And for me, it was, I said these things. I believed for these things. I prayed about these things. He did not write the story the way that we thought. And is God still going to be who I said he was now? And so really we were actually walking very similar things, just from really different places. And you just walk with a real humility about your past in a way that I think is good for me, that shows me things about the gospel. I told you when we first were being friends that you kind of made me believe in miracles again. Because we didn't get what we had asked for in the way of miracle, in the way of healing, that we thought that God might really do something extraordinary years prior, but still in like the same kind of time period. God showed up for you alone in a cell.
Yeah.
It truly miraculous. That story is like a miracle, and it was good for me to be reminded that God still does that he's still the same God that does that. And just because he didn't choose to do that for Scott in that way, that he's still that same God. And so I think that's one of the things that you remind me of.
I would highlight, so God showed up and God performed different miracles throughout our lives in different seasons, right? Today's a different season. I look at us being married. I look at that as like a miracle from God. I look at that as God's grace. The relationship with the kids, and how that
in the house,
has shifted. It was hard for them, right? I remember, the youngest one. I remember him clenching up when I would walk up to you. I would watch his body language from far, and he would clench up. And I was just sharing with you how recently, I take him to the soccer game, and he goes over there with his team, and he keeps looking back. And I'm like, well, why does he keep looking back? And he was looking for me.
He just wanted to know you were there.
And once he spotted me, he stopped looking.
Yeah.
Like he didn't look back at all anymore. And I knew that he felt safe. And that's a miracle in itself, right? That's a miracle of this season in our lives, you know. So it's the same God. It's same God's goodness and grace and miracles and all
and
the
still working,
great blessings and
still changing.
Yeah.
I think I think in some ways this whole season has, like, all of the last 4 years has been very humbling for me, because sometimes I look back and I'm like, man, maybe Scott was the saint, and I have things I still have to work on. I still have things that I have to get better at, and I am, a lot of times the one that, is putting my foot in my mouth, and so, there's just been a lot of humility too, in learning that God is still changing me, and definitely haven't arrived, and, that it's an ongoing race and journey. And, I have a lot still to learn.
Yeah. Until he calls us,
right,
to be with him in eternity. So it's a lot of my friend always says, he says 70 something years or however old he is, and I still feel like I'm scratching the surface.
Oh yeah.
I think that's all of us, right? We all have a lot to learn still, and a lot of growth to walk through. So.
Yep. Okay. What advice do you have words of wisdom for the dating, the newlywed? We have no marriage advice. We haven't been married long enough, but
I would say for like the dating, I would encourage people to pray and to listen. I shared this with you today about leaning in, leaning into the Lord and spending time with Him first. If you aren't grounded in that area, if you aren't grounded in that relationship, like,
you're not going to be any good in another one.
yeah, you're really not. And you're gonna make mistakes. I make mistakes, all the time. But I know the Lord, and I know where to look, regardless of what I do. Wrong or right. Like, so that would be my encouragement is, to lean into the Lord and really get to know Him and pray and listen.
Yeah, that's good.
What's your advice?
My advice? When I think about women and dating and making those choices, I think it comes so much back to identity and knowing who you are without a person. And that goes back to the Lord. So, I mean, I will look for someone else to meet my needs or to fill my confidence if I am not pursuing God first. And really, even in marriage, like, or even when you're in a committed, like, I mean, because have knew that you chose me even before we were married, right? Like we're in a committed thing, but you have moments of like insecurity. You're a human, and I am better in this when I know that the only person that can meet my needs is the Lord, and that nobody knows me better than that. Nobody can discipline me, change me, love me, know me like Him. And when I'm walking that out confidently, I'm actually more attractive because I'm actually more confident.
Yeah.
And so I just wish not just young women, but I just wish all women knew that their confidence is really attractive, but confidence comes from the Lord. And walking it out with Him, you don't need someone else to. No guy can meet your needs anyway.
Yeah.
It's just bonus. It is like cherry on top that I would get to be loved twice. Like that is so humbling and like overwhelming because it's just bonus. It doesn't make me who I am, and it certainly doesn't make the gospel any better. It's just a gift that God has chosen to give. But I am better when I remember that.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say. Why are you smirking?
Because I like you.
Oh, that's good. Okay, that's it.
Thank you so much for listening. If you have or know someone with an inspiring story, you can apply to be a guest at ordinarygrit.com. Be sure to connect with me on Instagram at Ordinary Grit Podcast to get to know me and my guests.